Ever put on like a playlist of brand new music, and after a few tracks, you kind of get this feeling, hang on, didn't I just hear something almost exactly like this?
Oh yeah, that feeling of sonic déjà vu. It's definitely a thing people notice.
Well, that's what we're digging into today. We're looking at this whole topic through the eyes of a music producer, someone who's seen it all, basically.
Yeah, this producer has decades under their belt. Started way back with analog tape, big consoles, all that stuff, and transitioned right into the digital age we're in now. So they've really lived through this massive shift.
An idea isn't just to, wax nostalgic about how things used to be. It's more about understanding why some modern music might feel, well, less unique, maybe, according to someone who's actually been shaping sounds through all these changes.
Exactly. And their starting point is fascinating. Think about the old analog days.
Yeah.
Just recording something, anything, meant microphones capturing sound waves moving through actual air in a real room.
Right. The physical space itself.
And that process alone introduced tons of subtle variations. The actual air pressure, the temperature that day, maybe it was humid. All that stuff subtly colored the sound hitting the mic.
Huh. Never really thought about the air having a sound.
Well, it affects how sound travels.
Yeah.
And each individual microphone, depending on what kind it was and exactly where you put it in the room, that added another layer of unique character. It was all very organic.
Okay, so contrast that with now. How's it different?
Well, think about how a lot of tracks are put together today. Often, maybe only the singer's voice is actually recorded through a microphone, picking up sound through the air.
And everything else.
Keyboards, bass, guitars sometimes, drums. A lot of that can go straight into the computer through cables. Direct input, they call it. It bypasses the room, bypasses the air, bypasses a lot of those natural variations we just talked about.
But we have all this amazing software now, right? Plugins that claim to sound like famous old mics or let you virtually place a mic.
We do. And some of it is incredibly sophisticated. But the expert we're drawing from makes a great point. They're still emulations. They're models. They can't truly capture the, infinite number of tiny little changes you could make with a real mic in a real space.
Like nudging it half an inch.
Exactly. Or turning it slightly off axis, or even sticking it behind an amplifier to get a weird, muffled sound. There are countless old tricks. And plug-in models, they give you options, sure, but it's not the same infinite physical reality.
That makes sense.
Plus, and this is key too, no two physical microphones, even if they're the exact same make and model, sound absolutely identical. Never. Each one has its own tiny flog, its own little sonic fingerprint. All that contributed to the uniqueness back then.
So the way the sound was captured was different. What about the actual performance?
That's another huge piece.
Yeah.
In the analog era, even if you use techniques like punch-ins.
Which is like fixing a small mistake on the tape.
Yeah, basically re-recording just a little bit. But even with that, the overall performance of the song, from start to finish, was essentially a unique event. Every verse, every chorus would have tiny variations in energy, timing, feel, just because humans played it.
Okay, I see where this is going. Digital audio workstations, DAWs.
Exactly. They make it incredibly easy to just, highlight a chorus you like, copy it, and paste it later in the song. Yeah. Or do the same with a verse or a guitar riff, even if a live band recorded the parts initially.
So you lose that natural development, that ebb and flow within the song itself.
It can happen, yeah. Things can feel much more repetitive, more blocky, maybe.
Yeah.
Less like a single evolving performance.
Now, I know some people point fingers at the first drum machines for starting this whole sameness thing, but our expert actually disagrees.
They do, and it's a really interesting perspective. First off, many of those really early drum machines, the iconic ones, they were often analog, and their timing, the quantization, which is like snapping the drum, hits perfectly to a grid. It wasn't always super precise on those old machines. There was often a little bit of slight sloppiness, a bit of drift.
It sounds more human.
Kind of. It gave the beats a certain feel, a groove that wasn't perfectly robotic. Plus, many early machines were also samplers. Producers weren't just using factory sounds.
Oh, right. They'd record their own sounds.
Totally. Guys like Lil Jon, David Banner, loads of hip-hop producers built their signature sound partly on their unique custom drum libraries. They sampled kicks, snares, hi-hats from records, other machines, whatever, and made them their own. Okay,
so how does that compare to digital drums today?
Well, now you often have drum plugins inside the recording software. These usually have incredibly precise, 100% accurate Quantization. Click, 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 perfectly on the grid.
Super tough.
Super tight, yeah. And instead of everyone building their own sounds from scratch, there's maybe more reliance on using the same preset sounds that come with the software or buying the same popular sample packs that thousands of other producers are also using.
Which naturally leads to more sounds sounding similar.
It can definitely contribute. And it's not just the sounds, it's the timing too. Our expert talks about tempo. Older recordings, often had these subtle shifts in speed.
Yeah.
The band might naturally push ahead slightly in a chorus or lay back in a verse. Click tracks existed but weren't always used, or maybe only used selectively.
Whereas now, the click track is pretty much standard practice for most genres, right?
Very common, yes. And beyond that, you have software tools like Pro Tools Beat Detective, for example, that can analyze a live drummer's performance after it's recorded and snap every single hit perfectly onto the grid.
Wow. So even if you play it live with feeling,
it can get digitally perfected afterwards, which, as our expert points out, kind of raises the question. If you're going to remove all the human timing variations anyway, what's the unique value of that live drum performance in the first place? Something to think about.
Definitely. What about vocals? That's another area where tech has changed things hugely.
Oh, absolutely. Think about classic techniques like double tracking vocals or stacking harmonies. Like on old Beatles records, you hear that lush, slightly swimmy sound.
Yeah, it's thick, but not perfect.
Exactly. That's because when you layered vocal takes back then, there were always tiny natural differences in timing and pitch between each take. That created this phasing effect, this richness.
And now?
Now, software can align those stack vocals with microscopic precision, lock them together perfectly. And you could do similar things with layered guitars or horns or whatever.
So it sounds cleaner, tighter.
It definitely can.
Yeah.
Very polished. But that pursuit of technical perfection might also, maybe inadvertently, scrub away some of that organic feel, that human element.
And then there's the elephant in the room, auto-tune.
Right. I mean, originally it was designed as a subtle fix-it tool, just to gently nudge a slightly off note into tune.
But it's become a very obvious effect in a lot of music.
It has. Used extremely, it creates that robotic, synthesized vocal sound, which is a stylistic choice, fair enough, but it also tends to mask the unique qualities, the little imperfections and nuances in a singer's natural voice. It can make different singers sound more alike.
Does tuning affect instruments in a similar way?
That's another really interesting point the expert raises. Think about an acoustic guitar, or a violin, or even an old analog synth. They naturally have slight tuning variations across their range. Maybe the high notes are ever so slightly sharper than the low notes.
Okay.
In older recordings, instruments might have been tuned relative to each other, getting a good blend, but maybe not perfectly in tune with some objective mathematical standard across every single note. And that slight wideness in tuning could actually create a richer, more complex sound, compared to many modern software instruments, which are often designed to be perfectly mathematically in tune on every single note they produce, which is technically correct, but can sometimes sound a bit sterile, almost too perfect, lacking that subtle character.
So we've got recording, performance, timing, tuning.
Yeah.
What about the mixing stage? Did analog have its quirks there too?
Oh, absolutely. When you mix down all your tracks in the analog world, the final destination was usually reel-to-reel tape.
Right, those big tape machines.
And just that process added its own sonic signature. Different brands and models of tape machines sounded different. Different types of tape, like the famous Ampex 456, had their own sound. Even the speed you recorded the tape at 15 inches per second, 30 inches per second, changed the frequency response and feel.
Wow, okay. More variables.
Loads of them. And then in mastering, the final step, engineers might even slightly speed up or slow down the tape machine. They called it sweetening, which would subtly alter the pitch and the tempo of the final track, just in a little fingerprint.
Fascinating. Okay, let's shift gears slightly to something listeners might have heard about. The loudness wars. How does that fit in?
Ah, yes. This ties in heavily. The story goes that as radio got more competitive, everyone wanted their song to sound louder than the next one coming out of the speakers.
To grab attention.
Exactly. Now, with vinyl records, there were actual physical limits. If you cut the groove too loud, the needle could literally jump out.
Okay, a physical constraint.
But when digital formats like CDs came along, and then digital files, those physical limits largely disappeared. Engineers could use tools like compression and limiting to squash the dynamics and push the overall volume level much, much higher.
And our expert shows this visually, right? With waveforms.
Yeah, it's quite striking. They compare waveforms of older tracks, think Let It Be, Elton John's Island Girl, George Benson's Masquerade, Prince's I Want to Be Your Lover, classics like that.
What do those look like?
They have peaks and valleys. You can see the loud parts and the quiet parts. There's dynamic range.
And the newer ones. They mention tracks like Semi-Charmed Life, Alicia Keys' Unthinkable, Beyonce's Texas Hold'em.
If you look at the waveforms for many modern loud tracks, they often look like a solid brick or rectangle. Everything is pushed right up to the maximum level, 0 dBFS.
That's the brick walling they talk about?
That's it. The dynamic range is massively reduced. Everything is loud all the time. Less contrast between quiet and loud moments within the song.
And the thinking is, all these things combine the recording methods, the copy-pasting, the perfect timing and tuning, the loudness, they all add up.
That's the core argument from our expert, yes.
Yeah.
All these technical trends, driven by technology and certain production aesthetics, cumulatively contribute to that feeling that maybe some modern music lacks the distinct sonic personalities that were more common in the past.
They mentioned attending some events, plug-and-play nights.
Yeah, this seemed to be a real catalyst for their thinking. They went to these events where young artists, often working alone in their home studios, would come and play their tracks. And while any individual track might sound perfectly fine, professional even, after hearing maybe 5 or 6 different artists, this striking similarity started to emerge.
In what way?
Like very similar tempos, often using similar pre-made rhythmic loops, similar synth sounds, similar bass patches. It all started to blend together into one kind of sonic landscape.
And talking to the artists revealed
That many of them were, understandably, using the same popular software, downloading loops and samples from the same few online platforms, using the same tools in similar ways.
which leads us back to the software and emulation point.
Exactly. These tools are incredibly powerful. Getting the sound of a classic Teletronics LA2A compressor or a Neve 1073 preamp or a Fairchild limiter gear that costs thousands in the real world, you can have that virtually for a fraction of the price. It's amazing.
It's like it's still a copy.
It's still an emulation.
Yeah.
As the expert really emphasizes, real analog gear has quirks. They talk about having one specific Neumann U87 microphone out of several they've owned that just has a certain magic the others don't. Or having 3 hardware distressors, a type of compressor, and each one sounds subtly different. And that's before you even consider the unique sound of different recording rooms. A track recorded at Abbey Road sounds different than one from Electric Lady, partly because the rooms themselves are unique instruments.
So when everyone uses the same emulations,
It's almost like everyone is borrowing the exact same virtual microphone preamp, running it into the same virtual U87 model, using the same virtual Roland Juno synth patch, triggering the same popular virtual Black Beauty snare sample.
creates a kind of sonic convergence.
It can, yeah. It potentially smooths out those unique edges that came from using varied, sometimes quirky, sometimes slightly imperfect physical gear in unique physical spaces.
So to be clear, the message isn't digital bad, analog good, right?
Not at all. The expert isn't bashing modern tools. They acknowledge how incredible and, frankly, democratizing this technology is. Anyone can make music now.
So what's the final takeaway?
It's really an encouragement, especially for people making music, but also for listeners to maybe think about. It's about actively experimenting, maybe pushing against the default settings, seeking out ways to inject more individuality. How can you use these tools to break the mold rather than fit into it?
Finding your own sonic fingerprint, even within the digital world.
Precisely. How do you cultivate a unique sound? That's the challenge and maybe the exciting part moving forward. Definitely food for thought.